Marvel Rivals Season 6 saw the introduction of the new hero Deadpool, a Vanguard, a Duelist, and a Strategist all in one. And a lot of balances and changes were made to a ton of the different heroes. My name is Dr. and in today's video, we're looking at how to counter every single hero in Marvel Rivals. Whether that's some sort of strategy or direct hero counters, I got everything you need in this one spot. If you like what you see, make sure to like the video, and of course, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you can see a ton of amazing content. That's enough about that. Let's dive straight into the video. We kick off this counter video with none other than the Vanguard section. We begin with Dr. Strange. You want to break his shield. Consistent damage is key. Things like Punisher, Squirrel Girl, even Iron Man if you really want to throw that into the mix. Characters that just do a ton of damage. You can also throw melee characters into the mix because they can melee through his shield. And their big thing is trying to flank him as much as possible. You want to attack him from behind, but his shield isn't protecting. It's rather easy to do this to get around him, especially with some sort of flanking duelist, whether it's a Psylocke or any of the other flanking duelists for the most part, just to annoy him to get him to turn around and draw his attention so the rest of your team can shred him from the back. Now you can also interrupt him when he's using his ultimate ability, Eye of Agamotto. You can use any crowd control ability, whether that's a stun, freeze, or a pull. Take for instance Winter Soldier, you can hook to Dr. Strange when he's about to cast his ult to cancel his ultimate. A big thing to keep in mind when you are canceling his ultimate, you're putting his ultimate charge back to 50%. And that goes for anybody in this entire game. If you cancel their ultimate, they're put back to 50. So you just have to keep in mind that if you are putting it to 50, you have whatever defensive cooldowns you need to try to counter it again. Another big thing to be thinking about is baiting out his flight. The more times you understand when he's going to be using his flight, it's going to be easier to counter him. Whether it's baiting him out so he flies up to attack a flyer, or if he's flying up to go for an ultimate, these are pretty big tells of what he's doing. If you can nail these steps, you're way closer to countering this character and never really having to worry about him again. Your direct hero counters you want to be thinking about are characters like Wolverine. You could throw Winter Soldier into the mix if you want to. You have Punisher, who can do a ton of damage and is consistent damage into his shield. You have characters like Squirrel Girl. Sometimes you can get away with flying heroes, not all the time, but sometimes. You also have Hulk, Thing, Emma Frost, Rogue, Angela, all these characters that can melee him through his shield, so those are big ideas as well. Again, you have like Luna Snow, Mantis, who have different forms of crowd control abilities that can stop him mid-ultimate. And that's essentially your key to countering a character like Dr. Strange. Moving on, we come to our glorious green giant, Hulk. Now, for your effective strategies, it's all about target selection. You want to focus fire on Hulk when he dives into the backline, especially if he's overextended. Some more big things is cooldown management. You want to wait for him to use his Gamma Shield before applying heavy crowd control abilities. Now, for any direct hero counters, of course, you have the obvious Vanguard Slayer, none other than Wolverine. You also have Iron Fist, high burst damage characters, Squirrel Girl. You could throw Moon Knight into the mix if you want to. Not a ton of damage, but a decent amount of damage. You could also say Punisher and Winter Soldier. All of these are great counters to him and just do a ton of damage. Whole idea, isolate him, shred him down as fast as possible, keep him rooted in place with different types of crowd control abilities. And that's essentially how you get rid of Hulk, especially when he's in your backline. Moving on, we come to Captain America. Now, he is one of these characters that you can sometimes leave and forget, but other times, if the captain knows what he's doing, he can easily harass your backline. So what are the ways to deal with this nuisance of a threat? Well, the first thing and highest priority should be destroying his shield. Now, his shield doesn't have the most amount of HP in the world. It does have some, so it's going to take a little bit to break, but once you do that, that's one of his major lifelines gone. Now, after breaking it, or if you don't break it, you can then transition into focus fire and crowd control. So you want to use any sort of crowd control ability, displacements, hooks, stuns, freezes, whatever the case may be of what you're using on your team to lock him down. After you lock him down, it's just a matter of your entire team shooting at him at the same exact time to quickly delete his health bar before he can disengage or get out. If you can't focus fire him and get him destroyed or deleted instantly, the other alternative is just making sure he doesn't have the chance to reset. Now, the more damage you do to him equates to him resetting and taking longer to come back to the fight. So if you can focus on that, just whether it's getting rid of him or just making him retreat, these are your best options. Now, in terms of our direct hero counters, you could use Vanguards like the Thing. You can throw Thor into the mix to push him around, just be a nuisance. You can also have Emma Frost. Rogue can also kind of go into the mix to just keep him marked 24/7. But honestly, Thing is probably one of your better options in terms of Vanguards to lock him down, especially with his displacement shift ability or his Yancey Street charge. For Duelists, typically any character with crowd control abilities, you can throw Winter Soldier, Wolverine. You can throw Namor into the mix just so the squids can mark him so you can keep track of where he's turning all the time. You can throw Punisher into the mix as well, as you can shotgun him, but again, he is rather tricky. Squirrel Girl isn't a bad option as well as some of the flyers, particularly Storm, because her damaging lightning AoE is a good way of marking him and keeping him grounded. Following that, of course, you have your strategist line with her Mantis, Luna Snow, with the crowd control abilities, the stun, the sleep, the freeze, and so on. You get the idea. These characters are some of the best at dealing with your, pseudo dive characters. Groot in Season 6 is probably one of the best Vanguards in the entire game right now, of course, except for Magneto and Emma Frost, but really due to the fact that now his big wall, whatever wall you want to call it, the big one that provides healing and extra health and such, now makes him unstoppable within the radius, which is a pretty massive change. In terms of strategy, the most obvious one is destroying the walls as fast as possible. Getting rid of that one wall that makes him unstoppable or unmovable, immune to crowd control effects, allows characters like Winter Soldier to truly punish him. So getting rid of his walls is a major factor. You also want to think about vertical pressure, using characters that fly like Storm, Iron Man, and so on to shoot over his walls. The biggest thing is his giant wall, the one that allows him to become unstoppable, immovable, whatever you want to describe it as. So your best option at countering Groot currently in Season 6, in my opinion, has to be Punisher or Squirrel Girl. These characters can easily shred down the walls and just allow you to really pressure him correctly. Now, of course, like always, you have your biggest counter, that being Wolverine, but the whole thing about this character right now is his wall that makes him pretty much immune to crowd control effects. So Punisher, again, characters like Squirrel Girl, the ones that are going to be shredding the walls as much as possible, are going to be your safest and probably best bet when it comes to dealing with Groot as of Season 6. Although this may change in the future, but honestly, this is what you'd be looking for in Season 6. Oh, Magneto, what are we going to do with this character? He remains at the top of his class even all the way in Season 6, not receiving any changes throughout all of these seasons except for pretty much buffs, which is kind of astonishing to me that this character still remains to be probably one of, if not the best Vanguard in all of Marvel Rivals to date. So you probably play against a Magneto player, probably I would say 2 out of 3 games for the most part, unless he's banned or unless nobody's just playing him in general. Now, the key strategies when it comes to dealing with a character like Magneto is to manage the shield cooldown. So Magneto's bubble shield has a 10-second recharge when depleted, creating a window to attack. That's when you want to be dumping all of your resources in. Then let's talk about some of our direct hero counters. Some of them, for instance, characters like Wolverine, Iron Fist, and Magik can all effectively cut through his defenses while he's shielding, which is a big importance. The same can be said with melee Vanguards as well. You have Emma Frost, Rogue, Hulk, Thing, and so on. Another big, decent counter, I have to say, is probably Adam Warlock and his Soulbond ability, or Loki's runes. All of this can be used to counter Magneto's ultimate, which can be extremely useful in a lot of different scenarios. You can also throw Punisher kind of in a counter as well. They kind of counter each other. When Magneto pops his ultimate, Punisher can also pop his ultimate to quickly blow up Mag's ultimate. But this is a big cost. You're risking, insta-dying as Punisher to potentially getting rid of Magneto's ultimate. Now, I'm not saying this is the most useful and probably best tactical play, but it can be used. Do I recommend doing it? Not really. Is it sometimes, fun to do, worth doing, taking a risk or a chance? Sometimes if you want that cool TikTok play, but I would just try to stick to the main counters. Hopefully you can keep some of this in mind while fighting against any Magneto you might come across in ranked or quick play or whatever game mode you're looking to play. Moving on to Peni Parker, and pretty much throughout every single Marvel Rivals,
the one counter to this character has remained the same in terms of strategy, and that is destroying her Peni nest, or whatever you want to describe it, the generators that spawn in the mines and it spawns in the spiders. Because destroying those placements allows her and her team not to receive that overshield, that healing, that movement speed. Of course, they might have changed it just a tad, but you get the idea. Going for a Peni, getting rid of the generator is a first priority. Once you got that one priority done, then you can start looking about other characters. You want to think about characters that deal a lot of damage and can do damage from a relatively good range. Those characters being Hela, Punisher, Winter Soldier, Storm, Iron Man, Squirrel Girl. You can even add some other characters as well. You have to keep in mind that Peni really and truly thrives in different sort of choke points. So it's your best interest or your best bet to try to avoid the most common areas, those common trap points, so that you don't just casually walk into a mine. For the most part, countering Peni Parker is rather straightforward. Just a ton of burst damage and destroying her placements and generators, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to Thor. Now, Thor, besides being just a little bit more of a duelist than a Vanguard, he's relatively easy and straightforward to counter. Although he does do a decent amount of damage, he lacks in some other aspects, and that's mainly mitigation. The big thing about Thor is exploiting his cooldowns. Thor is vulnerable after using his dash and hammer throw. In his awakened rune, you want to attack him immediately when these abilities are on cooldown. Another big hindrance to him is crowd control abilities, just like a lot of the other Vanguards. You want to use stuns, sleeps, roots, freezes, whatever it is to prevent him from being super mobile, because that is, well, where he truly shines. Now, keeping the distance from Thor is typically the best option because he is one of those characters that likes to gap close as quickly as possible. No matter who he's playing against, he does best when he can get on top of them and just really unleash as much AoE damage and just be a menace and a nuisance as much as possible. Yes, he does have the potential to, maintain that long range while using his awakening rune to throw the lightning, but that's really besides the point. You never really want to 1v1 him and just focus fire him down with the rest of your team. In terms of hero specific characters, you want to think about characters like Punisher, Winter Soldier, Hela, Star-Lord, high burst damage and longer range duelists. For your supports, of course, you have your Mantis, your Luna Snow, any character that has those hard crowd control abilities. Following that, for your Vanguards, you have Peni Parker, you have Emma Frost, you have Rogue, you can have all these other duelists or strategists that can just maintain the distance and continuously poke and prod at him using whatever means necessary. Moving on, we come to Venom. Now, when it comes to Venom, just like a lot of the Vanguards in this game, crowd control is your best friend at dealing with these characters. Characters, for instance, like Luna Snow with her freeze, Mantis' split or sleep, the list can go on, but any form of CC, crowd control for short. Following that, in terms of strategy, is a big thing about burst damage. So you immediately focus fire when he engages to break through his temporary HP. Now for your direct hero counters, you want to use high burst characters. Again, Punisher, Squirrel Girl is pretty good, Winter Soldier. You can also use flyers who do an excellent job, but you just have to be aware of the Venom jumping at your little feet. Again, we're looking at characters with a lot of high burst damage in terms of your Vanguard direct counters. We're looking at Emma Frost. We're looking at characters that will CC, stun, and ground him. Once you get a good understanding of how he engages, it's easy to counter, especially when he uses his overshield ability. Once that is popped, you give it a little bit and you can easily shred him down. Moving on, we come to the thing. No, not that thing, this thing. So going against the thing might not necessarily be extremely challenging, but your key strategies is to utilize high damage and range damage. You want to use characters with high damage output to burst him down before he can get close, such as Punisher, Hela, and if you really want to throw into the mix, Rocket Raccoon. He's one of those characters, even though he does become immovable or unstoppable using his Yancey Street charge, you can still use freeze and stuns on him, so that is something major to keep in mind. Another big thing is that the thing relies on his team for support. Isolating him from his healers or supports makes him much easier to take down. That being said, could be applied to a lot of the other Vanguards in this category. Your direct hero counters are characters like Wolverine. Even though, yes, he can't grab him and take him away, he's there to just do a ton of percentage base damage. You can also throw Iron Fist, Winter Soldier, Punisher, Hawkeye, Hela, Phoenix, a lot of these high burst characters, Squirrel Girl if you want to, you're there just to dump a ton of damage. That's literally all you do to get rid of the thing. Moving on, we come to Emma Frost, and in Season 6, it requires exploiting her limited range and reliance on cooldowns by using long-range damage, aerial characters, and shield-based tanks to pressure her. A majority of the time, you want to maintain distance and use different high-range DPS. Emma's primary attacks have, not the most amount of range in the world, so Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, and Black Widow for some people like Zaza. You want to use that to poke her down from afar. Now, aerial and high mobile characters can work against Emma Frost, you just have to be very cautious about how you approach the fight. Just like any other character, or any other Vanguard, matter of fact, using a ton of crowd control effects to lock down Emma Frost is one of the best rates of countering her. All you have to do is wait until she uses Diamond Form the second it comes off a cooldown. You have a small window, 15 seconds or so, to be able to shred down the Emma Frost until she gets Diamond Form again. Now, that's pretty much the direct counters were already said in terms of the strategy, but another really solid counter is Punisher. He can easily shred down an Emma Frost while ulting with his own ultimate. Kind of goes back to the Magneto versus Punisher debate, so this is another good thing to keep in mind and think about all the time. Countering Angela in Marvel Rivals Season 6 requires using high damage hit scan heroes. Predominantly, Punisher, Hela, Star-Lord to punish her aerial movement, and applying heavy crowd control effects such as Luna Snow, Mantis, Penny Parker, or even Thing to ground her. So a majority of the time, your key strategies are breaking her 350 HP shield, interrupting her dive, and capitalizing on her vulnerability when her cooldowns are active. A big thing to keep in mind is grounding her as much as you can pretty much all the time. The biggest strength in Angela is when she's flying. She can easily kidnap your teammates, so the best way is to ground her. Winter Soldier's E, Trooper's Fist, if I recall the right ability, you throw it out orb, it grounds them, so this is something to keep in mind. The things when you jump up to an enemy and right-click them also grounds. These are all great things to keep in mind. And when she is going for a dive onto one of your Vanguards or anything like that, you want to use stun or sleep abilities, specifically when she charges in to start her combo. Now, in terms of a lot of the other Vanguards, honestly, Angela doesn't have like the biggest health pool in the world, so you can easily focus fire her down and just completely shred her. Now, moving on to, I guess, not necessarily new, but one of our newer additions to our Vanguard section, it's Rogue. And just like a lot of the other Vanguards in this, connotation or whatever you want to describe it as, countering Rogue and Marvel Rivals requires using heroes with strong crowd control abilities. It's pretty much the universal key to solving all of your Vanguard problems. Heroes that can stop her momentum and movement are the most effective counters to this character. Emma Frost is a top Vanguard counter with Penny Parker while she uses her traps and such like that, limit her diving ability. Wolverine can be a major threat due to his ability to out-brawl her. You can also use range and poke characters as a close range brawler. Rogue struggles against range characters like Hela, Punisher. You can even throw Iron Man, Storm into the mix as well. Winter Soldier can be good some of the times. You can also throw in Magik if you are a Kingsman from a distance, making it difficult for her to engage. Now, Tank Pool is a rather interesting character. You want to focus on high burst damage to overcome his self-healing and range-based disruption. The strategy should revolve around interrupting his movement and momentum, so focus on stopping his sword dash to prevent him from chaining dashes and escaping. That's probably one of the best ways of dealing with him. When he throws down his unicorn shield, destroy it as fast as possible because it does block healing to some of your teammates. Now, some of the top direct hero counters are characters like Emma Frost with one of the best counters, capable of keeping him at range and punching him when he closes a distance. Thing, effective at stopping his movement and momentum, which is certainly true. Magneto, who provides strong, consistent damage to handle him, and a lot of hit scan healers, heroes that do just a ton of sustained damage, characters with good range, high damage, and huge output that can burst him down quickly is some of the best characters. Punisher, Winter Soldier, Namor, Hela, Phoenix, all these are great characters. Now, the biggest thing to have to keep in mind is that you need to focus fire him down in order to achieve maximum efficiency. But anyways, that concludes the Vanguard portion of today's video. If you like what you see so far, make sure to hit that like button and of course subscribe to the channel if you're new. And of course, you can also become a channel member, which also greatly helps me out. But regardless, let's dive straight into the duelist section.
Moving on, we come to the first duelist of our section, and that is Black Panther. Now, in terms of strategy for Black Panther, you want to punish his cooldowns. And after Black Panther uses his dashes and spears and it's on cooldown, he is rather vulnerable because the dash cooldown is on a pretty long cooldown, pretty self-explanatory. Following that, you really just have to listen to where he's moving. Black Panther quite a long time ago got a change that made him extremely loud when he's walking around, climbing on walls, all of the sorts. It's really easy to figure out where he's coming from. More strategy involves using hard crowd control effects, stuns, roots, knockups, freezes, whatever the case may be. He's a hypermobile character, so your whole idea is to keep him locked down into one place. Another major way of countering this character is this plain and simple teamwork. Being able to communicate with your team of where the Black Panther is moving is one of the best ways of dealing with a character, especially a flanking duelist, and this one strategy can be used and applied to a lot of the other flanking duelists as well. Teamwork and communication is probably one of the most effective ways. Letting your team know that you're getting dived by a Black Panther, in turn, usually tells your tanks or your other strategists to pay attention to you, saying, hey, I'm in trouble, so just talking to your team is one of the better ways. In terms of your direct hero counters, of course, you have characters like Winter Soldier, Namor, Thing, Mantis and Luna Snow. Invisible Woman can be pretty useful as well, Cloak and Dagger as well. Ultron is a big thing, and of course, when in doubt, use triple strategists to deal with the pesky divers. Now, typically when it comes to countering Black Widow, you don't necessarily have to worry about them because they're usually going 0-5, but that's besides the point. If you find yourself going against Black Widow who actually knows how to press their buttons, then here's what you need to keep in mind. Your probably best and only option is to do a multi-dive. Diving with at least 3 players on your team will result in the Black Widow not getting a ton of value. Another big character is Captain America with relentless pressure, just like how he has relentless pressure into Hawkeye. Captain America can be a nuisance to deal with, especially if you're playing Black Widow. Moving on, we come to Hawkeye. And countering Hawkeye in Marvel Rivals requires diving using shield tanks and controlling sightlines to exploit his low mobility and reliance on positioning. A lot of the time you want to think about dive and pressure. You want to use high mobile characters like Spider-Man, Venom, Black Panther to close the distance quickly and force them out of positions. You also want to be using shield or barrier tanks. These are characters like Captain America, Hulk and Magneto who can block his signs of light and protect teammates from his damage. Another big thing is to target his cooldowns, more particularly his Crescent Slash, which is his shift ability that pushes attackers away from him. So you want to dive him immediately after this ability is used. It's on a rough 12-ish second cooldown, so that is something to keep in mind. You dive him and you have a small window to re-engage. Another big thing is to break lines of sight all the time. When Hawkeye is ulting, it's in your best interest to break that line of sight. I wouldn't particularly use any strategist ultimates. The only ultimate I would recommend using is a Magneto ultimate. For the most part, it's rather scary using a strategist ultimate while a Hawkeye is ulting because he can pretty much insta-delete any of the strategists that are ulting, so these are big things to keep in mind. Moving on to Hela. Hela has been probably one of the best duelists since the dawn of this game's creation. With the Astral Flock, the ability to dominate mid to long range and even close range with her stun ability, it seems like the Death Goddess is pretty much impossible to counter. Well, some of that is true, she can still be countered. First, you want to dive and disrupt her. You want to utilize tanks like Venom, Captain America to jump into her face, disrupting her aim and forcing her to use her escape abilities. After she uses those escape abilities, that is your time. That's when she's vulnerable to get the jump on her. You also want to close the gap. You want to avoid standing in the open. You want to use cover to approach her and negate her long-range damage advantage. I would never recommend a solo dive onto a character like Hela, particularly because she can dominate those solo engagements, so diving on her with a multiple different dive duelists or a Vanguard pair is probably the best option. While she's in her ultimate form, this is where you want your entire team to shred her down. You can either pop Strategist ultimates, or you have a Dr. Strange fly up, or a Magneto can ult while everyone is shooting the hell down. The faster you get rid of the ultimate, the least amount of, damage your team is going to be taking, the less she gets value out of her ultimate. These are all great options. Now, of course, your direct hero counters are the typical, for your Vanguards. You could throw Venom, Hulk, Captain America all into the mix just to get into her face and really annoy her. But if the Hela is relatively good, she can get a ton of headshots in. So you just have to be extremely careful and wary of your entire health bar. For your Duelists, of course, you have your diving Duelists. But like I've stated, when it comes to diving these long-range shooters, these long-range Duelists, typically you want to go with a multi-dive. So a couple characters diving the Hela, the Hawkeye, your long-range Phoenix, for instance, all relatively straightforward. Now, when it comes to cheaper town hall and your key strategies, your whole first idea is to never try to go for a 1v1 against this character. Iron Fist, for the most part, excels pretty well in 1v1s if he knows what he's doing. Another big thing is, while Iron Fist is blocking, try your best not to shoot him whatsoever, because he turns all of that block damage into bonus health or a shield. So try not to shoot him. It's on a relatively long cooldown, so if you can catch him after he uses his parry, that is one of the best ways to get around him. Now, in terms of your direct hero counters, these are your characters that are going to be locking him down. So any characters with some type of freeze, stun, root, crowd control effect, that goes for a lot of the diving duelists or high mobile characters, is any way that will ground him, shut him down. These are the abilities and characters you want to be looking for. There's a ton to list, but as long as they have some sort of crowd control ability, this is what you're after. This is your whole goal. Of course, don't use your crowd control ability when he's using his parry, otherwise it won't do anything. So wait until after he uses his parry, then apply your crowd control effect. Moving on, we come to Iron Man. And to counter Iron Man and Marvel Rivals Season 6, you really need to prioritize accuracy hit scan heroes. Characters like Punisher, Hela, you can even throw Hawkeye into the mix, as he's a little bit of a projectile, but still relatively fast-firing projectile. You also have Phoenix. You can throw Deadpool duelists into the mix as well. But these are the characters you want to be prioritizing, as they're relatively easy hit scan characters and can easily shred down Iron Man. Another great counter, in my opinion, is Star-Lord, with his insanely good ultimate into Iron Man and just the sheer amount of damage and volume he does to that character. In terms of strategy, your whole strategy should involve grounding him as often as possible and focusing firing him down as much as possible as well. That's pretty much how you shut down a Star-Lord. I mean, Iron Man, not shutting down Star-Lord. Countering Magik in Season 6 honestly requires high burst damage, consistent crowd control, and strong appeal from tanks to stop her dive, specifically utilizing heroes like Peni Parker, Namor, Winter Soldier, and even Thor. You can also throw Hawkeye into that mix. Your most effective strategies honestly go about coordinating peel, punishing her cooldowns, and to counter the dive in close range. Your tanks in the scenario should be actively protecting your support players. When Magik dives, you want to immediately collapse on her to prevent her from securing a pick. Countering Moon Knight in Marvel Rivals Season 6 requires high mobile characters, long range pressure, and focusing on destroying his Ankhs or his beacons, whatever you want to call it, to limit his sustainability and damage propagation. Your core tactics revolve around destroying his Ankh as quickly as possible each and every single time. Avoid sticking too close to your teammates so that his primary and secondary attack do not bounce off one another. You also want to think about dive and poke. He can be rather frustrating or tricky to 1v1 against, because he does have, quite a lot of tools in his arsenal to sustain himself, whether it's the mobility, his onks, or his right clicks for the bonus HP. These are big things to keep in mind. Big things. If you ever find yourself a Groot ulted and there's a Moon Knight on the other team, you never ever want to pump your Strategist ultimate inside of that Groot ult, because if you're in it and the Moon Knight does the Groot Moon Knight combo, you're just gone as dead. I wouldn't pop anything, and if you're playing Adam, wait for the res afterwards. For the most part, the whole idea is just poking him from afar, from a distance, whether that's characters like Phoenix or Hela. Even Hawkeye, for instance, are probably some of your best choices in terms of countering him as a duelist. Moving on to Namor, Budget Poseidon. So Namor, the whole idea of countering this character is destroying his turrets as much as possible, diving him with multiple tanks and using long-range heroes to out-poke him. Effective counters include characters like Hela, Punisher, Moon Knight to bounce your shots off of the squids. Winter Soldier is also super effective. Punisher, for the most part, can be effective, but Namor's ult can counter Punisher's ultimate, so you just have to have a Magneto bubble Punisher. The next big strategy is forcing out his Blessing of the Deep ability, which is his bubble that makes him immune to, pretty much everything. So you want to engage him to burn his protective bubble ability, and once it's gone, that becomes extremely vulnerable to burst him down extremely quickly. Again, Namor has received some buffs over the time to where he has a team up with Hela, and that team up is rather scary because he does rack up a ton of damage. So these are all just big things to try to keep in mind. I guess one other key thing to keep in mind is communication, just like a lot of these characters that have a ton of utility in the game, and that is to clearly communicate where his squids are and to quickly delete them. The longer those squids are up, the more damage he's going to be applying to your entire team, therefore creating more pressure for your healers to heal, more pressure that your tanks are going to have to step back and peel for your team because they're low HP, and just less power your duelists have in order to flank. All these are a set of butterfly effects that do rack up over time, so this is a big thing to keep in mind, so clearly and quickly destroy those turrets. Moving on, we come to Psylocke, and with Psylocke, it's all about positioning. You want to avoid isolated areas and steering your teammates to prevent being picked off by all for damage. She is one of those backline diving duelists to keep in mind, so anti-dive measures is going to be some of your best options, whether that's using defensive abilities, turrets from Namor, Peni, Parker, whatever the case may be. These are all keys to keep in mind. Also, the handling invisibility. When she goes invisible to escape, you want to use AoE abilities or try to track her with footsteps. In terms of the ultimate, you can still stack her ultimate, but you just have to pop an insane amount of heals so that you don't instantly get destroyed. In terms of some of your best characters to counter her with, you have characters like Namor, Captain America, Loki, Magik, Luna Snow, and Adam Warlock can all be super effective characters against a character like Psylocke. I'm going to start combining characters to the same section so that this video isn't 3 hours long. We're next going to be looking at Punisher, Scarlet Witch, Spider-Man, Squirrel Girl, and of course Star-Lord. So let's go ahead and talk about countering Punisher. So countering Punisher involves aggressive diving, using hard shooting tanks to block turret fire, and leveraging long-range heroes to out-damage him. In terms of your strategies, you want to delete his turret the second he pops it up to quickly get rid of it. As his turret's up, the more damage he's going to be outputting, so getting rid of that as quickly as possible is the best case scenario. Dive and disrupt, so you want to use the mobility heroes to force him out of his entrenched high ground positions, or just try to get him away from you as much as possible. Your counters in terms of hero direct counters are Magneto. His shield absorbs his massive amount of damage, his ultimate counters his ultimate, and such is the case for a lot of the other stuff. For duelists, of course, you will have some of your characters like Hela, Hawkeye to outrange and outdamage him, and just a lot of characters that will just do a ton of damage. Namor is also a great counter by using Namor's ultimate to counter Punisher while he's ulting. He's relatively slow while ulting, so using Namor ult is a great way to answer it. Moving on, we have Scarlet Witch. Now, Scarlet Witch doesn't offer that much to most teams or just the game in general. She's rather easy to shut down as there's a lot of ways to deal with her. For the most part, you want to be prioritizing high burst damage, whether that's Hela, Phoenix, Punisher, Hawkeye, and so on. Characters that 1 to 2 tap her are generally the best option. When she's ulting, you either hide behind some piece of cover or you try to use some form of crowd control effects, whether that's a stun, a freeze, a hook, a root, a grab, whatever the case may be, because she's not crowd control immune inside of her ultimate, so you can easily exploit that by just shutting her down. But something you have to keep in mind, though, is just like what I stated in Dr. Strange's portion of the video, is that when you
delay the ultimate, it puts it at 50. So it's going to be off timer, so that's just something you have to keep in mind. Moving on, we have Spider-Man. Now, countering Spider-Man in Marvel Rivals Season 6 requires using characters with hit scan weapons, high damage output, or strong crowd control abilities. These are characters like Mr. Fantastic, Winter Soldier, Penny Parker, Emma Frost, big CC characters. Phoenix and Hela and even Black Widow all do phenomenal jobs at countering him when he's trying to dive because they all have some sort of stun that can easily dominate him. And like I stated previously, as he is a diving duelist, one of the best ways at countering this is just calling him out, knowing where he's positioned, where he's going, and just understanding when he goes in for a combo is going to be your best friend at shutting this troublemaker down. Moving on, we have Squirrel Girl. And countering Squirrel Girl is using high mobility flying characters or precise hit scan DPS and shield based things to negate her projectile spam. A lot of your, big counters are Iron Man, Human Torch, Storm, the flying duelist. Although Human Torch isn't the best right now, maybe try Iron Man or Storm. And a lot of the ranged duelists that do a lot of damage, for instance, Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, Winter Soldier if you want to throw him into the mix as well, are all great at countering Squirrel Girl because they have a lot more range in comparison to Squirrel Girl. In terms of strategy, you want to avoid tight corridors so she isn't getting a ton of splash damage onto you. You want to spread out, and the second she uses her ultimate, you want to immediately destroy it as fast as humanly possible, because the longer it's up, the more value it's going to be getting, and just the more damage she's going to be doing overall, so getting rid of it as quickly as possible is always going to be your best bet. Moving on, we have the notorious Star-Lord, and your best DPS counters are Winter Soldier, Hela, Hawkeye, even Phoenix, your 1 to 2 shot characters that can quickly eliminate him. His whole thing is about uptime, so if you can shut that down and negate his impact, that's what it's all about. Most of the time, because he's one of those characters that relies on cooldowns, both his right click, his kick flip, and his spin, his Beyblade, whatever you want to call it, he is heavily reliant on those and a triple strategist lineup. So for the most part, if they're not running a triple strategist, it's really easy to shut down a Star-Lord, but the second triple strategist comes into play with the Star-Lord, he becomes pretty unstoppable. That's why you have to go for those 1 to 2 shot heroes that can quickly eliminate him. Moving on, we come to Storm. Now, Storm, just like any other flying duelist in this game, hit scan is going to be your best option. For the most part, focus firing and just getting her out of the equation is a big thing because she acts as another sort of strategist, buffing your team in both of damage and speed. If Storm is using her Omega Hurricane, you can use characters like Phoenix to quickly get her over health to pretty much 0, leaving her 1 HP, and it just takes a couple shots to get rid of her. Now, Omega Hurricane isn't the scariest ult in the game because if you just focus fire down, it's extremely easy to get rid of. You just have to have coordination. And pretty much like in every game, coordination always proves successful in a lot of different scenarios and cases. So understanding that concept will help you counter a lot of the characters in this game. Now, it seems like a lot of players in Season 6 are actually having a lot of issues with Winter Soldier or Bucky. He is incredibly strong right now, and honestly, my personal favorite duelist in the entire game, if you're familiar with my content, or you haven't seen it in a while, Bucky, hands down my favorite. But that being said, there is a lot of ways to shut him down. Basically, the best idea is just maintaining fire and trying to out-damage him. For the most part, your best options are poking from a distance with Hela, Phoenix, Punisher. Whatever you can use for range is going to be the best case scenario, because he is, I would say, more medium to close range. He can get off some long range shots if he's lucky enough or has decent amount of skill. Just be the same part. One big way to shut down a Winter Soldier is to call out his hook. When Winter Soldier is looking for a hook, you can easily hear it, meaning he's going to be stepping up and positioning himself ahead of his team or off to the side. With that being said, it's easy to focus fire him down when he's not really playing that safe and looking for the aggressive hook. Moving down the line, we come to Wolverine. For Wolverine, it's the same case, kind of like Winter Soldier, of poking him from a distance with a different duelist like Phoenix, Hela, and Hawkeye. Whatever is that ranged duelist. Crowd control are great factors to try to stop him, whether it's a freeze, stun, sleep, whatever it may be. If Wolverine is going in for a grab, just like Angela, you can play Invisible Woman and pull the Wolverine towards your team, and it will drop the player they're grabbing so that you can save them and hopefully save the life of your teammate. Moving on to Mr. Fent or Mr. Fantastic, the whole idea is to maintain distance. He's a mid to close range brawler, so it's up to you how you want to play it. Sometimes flyers are a good option, but that's not always the case because he can press E to you and bring you down to the ground because he has a grounding ability now. For the most part, it's just about dealing damage from a distance. So Hela, Hawkeye, Punisher, Winter Soldier, Phoenix, Black Widow, if you really want to throw that into the mix, just maintaining that distance. While he's in his inflative mode, his big mode, you can easily shut him down because his hitbox becomes insanely massive. So just taking care of that is a big thing. It's just another case of if you want to use crowd control abilities after he uses his reflective rubber or Pop-Tart mode, as I like to call it. Once that is gone, you can dump all of your abilities onto him. Human Torch in Marvel Rivals Season 6 isn't really a massive threat, but if you do find yourself coming into this threat and you don't know what to do, your biggest options, of course, are hit scan heroes. This is the best way to shut down any flyer in the game. And like I said, currently, he got nerfed into the ground, so you're not really seeing him played a ton. But like I said, if you do find him, hit scan is the option, and then shooting him and grounding him whenever you can is the best option. I keep saying option, but you get the idea. Now let's talk about Jean Grey. Despite what anyone says, this character is still insane. Your best options are mirroring her with another Phoenix, using Hela or other ranged duelists to try to poke her out. You can go for a multi-dive, however, she has a stun and a getaway, so it might be limited. You want to punish her immediately after she uses her movement abilities. It's kind of like countering Hela at the same time. They're kind of the same character in a way, where they both have a stun, they both have a movement ability, although Phoenix has some more movement than Hela, but the general approach is relatively the same. So countering Blade in Season 6 requires using long-range heroes, heavy stun or lockdown capabilities, and aerial maneuvering to exploit his limited verticality reach. Your key characters include long-range DPS like Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, Winter Soldier, and pretty much anything else. My only recommendation I really truly give in terms of strategy is to avoid him in super tight corridors, especially as he has his ultimate. That's probably the big thing. Don't stand in a line or super grouped up together. Moving on, we come to Daredevil. Still an extremely strong character, but can be countered relatively easily. So for your duelist, Wolverine is excellent for tracking his movement and surviving his bursts. You also have Winter Soldier, who can withstand that 1v1. In terms of your strategists, Luna Snow, Rocket, Mantis are all good. After he uses his block or his reflect, that's when you want to drop crowd control effects. For your Vanguards, you have Venom, Groot. These characters excel at countering Daredevil. Now, in terms of strategy, you can counter his ultimate by turning away and not looking at him. Yes, that certainly is true. You don't get the damage and you don't get the blinding effect. However, by turning away, you might be walking into a trap and, just more and more. But you get the idea. You can look away to kind of counter his ultimate. Is it necessarily the best play in the world to do? Probably not. But can you do it? Absolutely. Would I recommend it? Up to you. But that is something to keep in mind. Finally, we come to Deadpool Duelist. Now, Deadpool Duelist requires burst damage, lockdown abilities, and focusing fire to counteract his high mobility, healing factor, and damage reduction. A lot of the time, you want to choose characters that can use crowd control effects to really lock him down. Focus firing him down is also a great example. He really gets a lot when he just has that hyper mobility with his jumping. So trying to get him grounded, locked down is some of the best ways to counter him. Characters like Iron Fist, any hit scan characters, or Winter Soldier are great counters that can truly shut him down. The biggest thing to do is just to lock down the character. Namor can also dish out a ton of damage with his tracking squids when he is that hyper mobility character. So keeping all of those factors in mind is some of the best and probably the best thing to do. Moving on to the strategist section, we kick things off with Adam Warlock. Now, Adam Warlock utilizes heavy dive compositions to be exploited. With the lack of mobility he has, you can easily force him out to use his soul bond early, then re-engage once it's on cooldown, as it's on a pretty long cooldown. Do keep in mind though, Adam Warlock in 1v1 scenarios should be the dominant one, should come out on top, so diving with at least 2 players is typically the option. He's essentially Hela with a little bit of healing. You want to use characters that can displace him, so think about characters like Angela, Winter Soldier with the hooks, even Wolverine if he goes in, because the Adam Warlock lacks mobility, so if you get him brought into your team, he's easily able to get shredded down. Keep those things in mind, and Adam Warlock is less of a problem. Another thing to keep in mind is his ultimate. His resurrection, when he rests his team, they all spawn in with an overshield. So you could be playing Phoenix into Adam Warlock. So when they use that soul bond, when they use that res ultimate ability, you Phoenix ult, so you immediately deplete their overshields, which can be beneficial to your team. Although you're using a Phoenix ult, just get rid of the shields and they get all healed up. But it depends on how you want to play it. You could combo a Phoenix with a Winter Soldier on top of his ultimate, and they should all be taken care of. Moving on, we have Cloak and Dagger. Encountering her requires interrupting their healing ultimate and punishing their positioning. Your key counters include using Magneto's ultimate to instantly kill them and Dr. Strange's ultimate to counter their mobility at the end of their ult. You can also use Punisher with a shotgun while mid-ult to one-tap them. You can also use Hawkeye or a Widow Mantis boosted to one-shot them as well. Your key ideas is to bait out the Cloak's fade, so the invisibility form. Once that is done, it's really easy to catch them out of sight and out guard. Moving on to Jeff, you want to use high damage aim dependent heroes to burst them down quite quickly. Your key counters are characters like Hela, Punisher, Hawkeye, Iron Fist for tracking, Phoenix to ult right when he eats people in his ultimate. Winter Soldier can also do a decent amount of damage. You're just going for characters that will just absolutely unload an unfathomable amount of damage into Jeff while he's under the ground or after his ultimate. All of this is crucial with dealing with the pesky little shark, and that's really about it. Moving on to Loki. For Loki, it's all about baiting his abilities out. Both his teleport, his Domation regeneration ability, his greens, his runes, whatever you want to call them, and his right-click invisibility. The second he snaps his fingers and teleports, that's one of his major lifelines away. The second he uses his runes is another major lifeline. If you can go in, bait out the runes, get out, and then re-hit before he gets his runes back off a cooldown, that is the perfect time to fight him. Also, another big thing, each time he places a clone, try to get rid of it as quickly as possible. The more clones he has up, the more damage, the more healing, and the more potential to stay alive is all greatly increased. The more you can get rid of the clones, the less likely he is to really be super beneficial to his team. Then for Luna, this character is still insanely broken all the way from Season 0. It is the poster child of this game. And pretty much the counters remain the same. Iron Man's ultimate, Magneto's ultimate, focus firing, multiple dives, you name it. It's pretty much the same case every single season. And honestly, she feels like she's just getting stronger and stronger as time goes on because she has a self-snowflake now, which is kind of crazy, but you get the idea. For Rocket Raccoon, encountering him, the whole idea is to flank around, destroy his BRB or his respawn beacon so that he can't res teammates. Again, it's on a 45-second cooldown, so that is something to keep in mind when I put that on timing. The second Rocket Raccoon uses his ultimate, immediately destroy it with whatever means necessary to get rid of it. Focusing that first down in the fight should be the highest priority over anything else. That unless if you're a strategist and you have to pop your own ultimate to keep your team alive, but you get the idea, destroying his utility is the biggest option. Just like Peni, just like Namor, destroying utility is the biggest step in dealing with this character. Besides that, you can use different characters to get rid of him. He has a rather large hitbox, so you could use Hela, Phoenix, Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, and other hit scan duelists to try to get rid of him. Moving on, we have Invisible Woman. So countering Invisible Woman requires breaking her right-click shield, so it's always on cooldown, with high burst damage, and distracting her of where she moves. She has one escape, which is her double jump that goes invisible. If you're able to track it, it's really easy to counter her. In terms of countering her ultimate, typically you want to play for characters that can pull her out. So Winter Soldier, Wolverine, Angela are all great options to try to pull Invis outside of her ultimate if she's in it, to potentially get rid of her as quickly as possible so that the ult no longer is in the game. You really just want to prevent her escape and use target priority to really focus her down, just like any other character in the game. Also, using Dr. Strange's ultimate is a really good option as well. Then we go into Mantis, who also falls into that, where Dr. Strange excels at dealing with Mantis. For the most part, Mantis does do a lot of damage. You can easily jump on her and do a multi-dive. She has one crowd control ability that only hits one target, so that is easier said than done to dive her. But still be warned, she can do a lot of damage, so that is something you have to keep in mind. But in terms of countering her, it's rather straightforward. It's just about focus firing and really locking her down so she can't really move around too much, because that's where she gets all of her value. Then we have Ultron. Ultron is in that same spot of a lot of the other flying duelists in this game. But for a strategist, all you have to do, pick a hit scan character. Hela, Punisher, Phoenix, Hawkeye, Star-Lord are all great options to counter him, as he is rather mobile for 6 seconds after using his shift ability. After that, it's on a relatively longish cooldown, so you can easily focus fire him down. If the Ultron has ulting, you can use Star-Lord's ultimate to easily counter his ultimate. Again, pretty straightforward. It's a flying character. Hit scan characters are going to be your best option. So countering Gambit and Marvel Rivals, the best option is if you're playing in ranked to straight up ban him. The character is insanely strong, regardless of what anybody says. The character is dominant. Probably one of the most picked and most banned characters in the entire game, so banning him is the best option. Now, you really want to interrupt his ability usage, so if you see him trying to pop an ultimate, you should play Hulk to try to exile him. Using whatever you can just to slow his tempo and pace down is the best option. When he's popping his ultimate, you can either disperse away, try to hide, or you can group up and use your own counter strategist ultimate. It's just, once that character gets going, it can get rather difficult to shut him down. Verticality is a great option to try to use high ground to escape or poke and prod at him from a distance, and you really need to understand how to manage resources. Understand that a skilled Gambit will try to save his purifying pickup card to cleanse, any crowd control abilities or baiting out his ability before committing to a stun in any type of order. Moving on to Strategist Deadpool, he's kind of like the other Deadpools in a sense of how you want to shut him down, just using crowd control abilities, as he is pretty mobile when he jumps from head to head, or gets a jackpot skill or whatever it's called. But for the most part, it's just about really focus firing him down, poking from a distance with Hela, Hawkeye, and so on. You get the idea. Most of the time, shutting down these strategists from a distance is best used with characters like Hela, because you can 2-tap from a distance and to stop all of that healing. The strategies, for the most part, for a lot of the strategies in the game are pretty cut and dry of how it works, just poking from a distance, trying to jump onto one strategist and taking them one down one by one, because it could be rather difficult to try to take out 2 at a time because they'll just be healing each other. So if you can all focus your attention onto one character, it makes your life so much easier. So at the end of the day, the biggest counter to most of the characters in this game is this clear-cut communication. If you can focus fire the same targets, you can easily counter each character in the game. Of course, there's always easier options of what to do, but for the most part, that's what we're looking at. But anyways, hopefully this video has helped you in any way, shape, or form. And if it has, make sure to hit that like button, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new. This video took quite a long time to record and make, because I've taken a little break from our rivals, but hopefully we can get back into things. Well, regardless of anything, I hope you guys have a great and safe day, and I'll catch you in the next one.